Good day, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Michael Malondo, and I'm going to present on the subject of health education for the standalone program called HE10S1. This presentation will be divided in two sections. The first section will be on the guideline, how to prepare yourself for the exam before, and then also during the exam, what is prepared, what is expected from you. Then the second part of my presentation is I'm going to look at the content of the subject itself, and then as I call the examination scope. But beside the scope, it is still expected from you as a student to have an understanding of the whole content of the subject and to know exactly what is expected from you. So to start with, the first part of this presentation is I'm going to give you some guidelines, some practical guidelines that I've learned from my experience in preparation of exam papers, and then also talking to other students. Before the exam, you at least need to make sure that you've got a timetable. Whether it's 2 months or 1 month before the exam, you have to make sure. And what you have to do is, when you have a subject with 5 or 10 or 15 units or chapters, you have to divide those chapters within those 2 months. Whether it's 4, 5 or 8 weeks, make sure that you divide them. Then there are 3 things that you have to do. The first thing is, when you are going to divide them according to your timetable or time schedule, you first need to read through the content of your book or the content of your subject. Read through your chapters to make sure that you understand, because the whole purpose of reading is to understand the content. Many students make the mistake where they start to memorize or to study, but they don't have an understanding on the context of the subject. So it's very important for you, it is expected from you to read through it and then to make sure that you will understand what is expected from you. So once you are reading through the subject or the chapters, advisably it will be helpful if you make notes. You can circle, you can underline those keywords, concepts that you don't understand. You make notes. If you have something additional information, make notes, whether it's on the study manual, whether it's on your separate book. Just make sure that you make enough notes, because you will need these notes once you go through and make for your revision. So it's very important that while you are making your notes, that you can also you have to look at other resources that are available, whether it's online, whether it's printed materials. Make sure additional information during this period of reading through your book and making notes. Then thirdly, revision is very important, especially preferably 1 week before the exam starts. Then you just go through your notes that you've made to read through, and it will actually help you. You find students that they start to study to revise the day before they write the exam or the day before they write that subject. So please, I will advise you, take enough time just to prepare yourself. So now you are prepared, you went through your timetable, through your schedule, 2 months, a month in advance. Now you are sitting now in front of your exam paper. Now during the exam, it's very important, when you have the exam paper in front of you, the first thing that you have to do is to read through the question. Read through the question, and while you're reading through your question, number 2 is you select the question that's easiest for you. Always start with the question that's easy. Because you will find yourself that when you start with a question that's difficult, that it's time wasting, and then you will not have enough time, and you find yourself that your time is limited to write the questions that are easy. Then thirdly is, then after you have selected the question, make sure that you read the question again to understand. Understanding the question is very important, because what we have found in exam, many students make the mistake, they assume What they read is what the question is. So read exactly what the question is there saying, and then understand the question. Then fourthly, which is very important, is then answer the question that's been asked. Don't interpret the question, don't assume this is a question, but answer the question that's actually asked. So these are the tips that you can use for your examination, and I hope it will also be helpful. Now, when you go through the content of the subject, very important. Now, health education, especially for the standalone program, it's very comprehensive. There's so many aspects that you have to cover. There are so many themes that you have to cover under health education. So my presentation will actually guide you to look at certain themes that might be helpful for you to prepare for your exam. But as I said earlier, I want to repeat it again, this examination scope does not limit you not to read the whole study manual or the whole subject. So it's very important for you to understand the whole subject, to read through the whole study manual, for you to have a better understanding on what the subject is. Students, they make the mistake where they only focus on certain chapters, assuming these are the only chapters that will be in the exam. But it's very important that when you are going to write the exam, at least you're going to write it because you've got the holistic understanding on the subject itself. So the first one is we're going to look at TB, or tuberculosis. Now you have to be able to define what is TB, why TB is so important for our health, what are the symptoms of TB, how can TB be transmitted, people are being infected with TB, is TB a communicable disease or a non-communicable disease? These are some of the things that you have to look at. Why is TB so important when it comes to health prevention? And then secondly is then you look at HIV. How do you link HIV with TB? And how is it very important to make sure that when you are on HIV and you've got a co-infection with TB, how do you make sure that you manage these two diseases? So it's very important that in your paper you have to discuss or differentiate the two diseases. Then secondly is you have to identify the linkages of these two diseases. And thirdly then you have to look at the dynamics or the impact these two diseases is having on an individual, secondly on the community, and thirdly on the nation at large. You can also make reference to different policy, the TB policy of Namibia. You can look at different guidelines. You can look at the WHO guidelines when it comes to TB. You can look at the DOT, which is the direct observation treatment for TB, for example. You can look at HIV and ARV, how these two are linked, as I said earlier. So it's very important that when you are looking at TB, you have to find and prove that there are linkages when it comes to TB, tuberculosis, and then HIV. Secondly is nutrition. Food is very important, especially for people living with HIV/AIDS. Of course, food is important for every human being. It's the basic need. You need food every day just to survive. Food is there to fuel your energy. Food is there to fuel your health. So the balanced diet will actually determine what kind of condition your body will be. So your health is linked to the food that you eat. So having a balanced diet every day actually makes it very important for you to be healthy and to have a healthy lifestyle. So in your paper you're going to discuss nutrition, the different types of nutrition, the different types of food, and then you're also going to discuss the linkages between nutrition and people living with HIV/AIDS and HIV. How do you link? Why is food so important for people that are on treatment? People are using medication. Why do you need to use medication and food? There's a lot of people that don't use proper meal, or they don't have a balanced diet, and because of that it has an impact on their medication. So in your paper you have to discuss that in detail, give practical example, and then you can also refer to my previous presentation, and it will be very helpful that during your preparation, the 2 months preparation according to your timetable, you can also go to the library, you can also look at the internet and look at different interventions. You can also talk about the food security. You can bring it home to Namibia. You can talk about the Harambe prosperity plan. You can talk at poverty nutrition. What makes people not to have food? If people don't have food, how will that negative impact them as a community? So discuss that in detail as much as possible to make sure that whoever is going to look at those discussion of what you have write in your paper will know that you have an understanding of nutrition and people living with HIV/AIDS. Then, of course, the immune system. Now, health education is one of the most interesting subject that does not just look at people living with HIV/AIDS, look at other factors of infection outwardly, but it also looks within the body. And this is where you have to have an understanding of basic biology. So it would be advisable if you can go and read some biological books on the body. How does the body function? Why does the body have certain cells? And what is the makeup of the body? And one of the things that's within the body is what we call the immune system, which is the defense mechanism which is within the body. And it's there that helps the body to defend itself from any intrusion. And that intrusion is called infection, whether it's flu, whether it's TB, any kind of virus that can intrude your body. So remember, your body has a way of cleaning itself. Now, in your discussion or in your paper, you have to explain in detail what is an immune system. How does it work within the body? Why do we have immune system in our body as a defense mechanism? How does it work? What can actually break down your immune system? Why is immune system so important for HIV infection? Why do you need to build up your immune system during the time that you are using medication? And this is where you can also bring in the linkages of other aspects we've discussed earlier about nutrition. So very important, as I say, define what immune system is, what the system is all about, what does it entail, how does it work in the body, why is it very important, how you can boost your immune system or your defense mechanism within your body. So these are some of the things that you have to look at and you have to discuss in detail to make sure that you explain in detail why you need the system. Then, of course, as I say, health education cover a number of subjects and themes. It's not just looking at the disease itself and at the function of your body, but then it also covers the whole issue of adolescent, young people. Now, adolescent is a very interesting subject where you have to define on what is an adolescent, who is an adolescent, what is the age group of an adolescent, young person, what are the biological makeup of an adolescent, what happens within the biological setup. So this is where you link the biological setup or the biological factors, the intellectual, psychological factors of an adolescent. You can also discuss the different stages that an adolescent is going through, and for each stages, how do they address, especially when it comes to challenges, because many adolescents and young people are having challenges or they're having problems. How do they deal with these problems? And especially when it comes to lifestyle diseases, when it comes to their lifestyle, when it comes to their behavior. So in your exam paper, you have to discuss this in detail. How is that very important? Why are adolescents? And how are you going to educate adolescents when it comes to their risky behavior. You have to look at the risky behavior of adolescents and what factors contribute to this risky behavior. There's a lot of issues, factors like peer pressure, for example. And this is mostly the stage where many young people are facing because of their peer pressure. They are being a negative influence, and they find themselves where they have to compromise their health, where they have to compromise themselves. So in your discussion, bring this up, this aspect of adolescent and risky behavior, and then also looking at in the context of HIV and AIDS. So you have to explain it in detail. Then, of course, health-related information. Information is very important. You can also bring the principle of IEC, which is information, education, and communication. How are you going to use information or materials in order to communicate the content of health, or the aspects or the truth of health to young people or to the community? So in your whole discussion paper, you have to look at the issue of communication, health communication. There are guidelines that you have to follow when it comes to health-related information. Health-related information in the context of confidentiality, secrets. For example, there are some information that you cannot divulge, or you cannot talk about, or you cannot reveal because of ethical principles. So you have to discuss what kind of information are you supposed to share, and what kind of information are confidential, what kind of information are not allowed to be shared with. Now, if we have an outbreak in a town, say in your town you've got a health outbreak, say there is cholera, or there is hepatitis outbreak, or there is a TB, any endemic disease outbreak, and the government wants to contain this, or the local authority wants to contain this outbreak, or the health authority wants to contain this outbreak, what kind of information will be shared with the community, and what kind of information will not be shared with the community, which means it will be withheld from the community. Now remember that health-related information can also create massive panic. People can become so panicked, confused, and it can actually result into riots where community members take things into their own hands, and at the end you've got a bigger problem. So information is very important, specifically when it comes to health-related information. So, and this is where most of the time, even as an organization, that's why nowadays you find in most health-related institution, health-related organization, you have what they call a designated spokesperson, or a PRO, or a public relation officer, to divulge certain information, whether it's via press release, whether it's through a situation report, what they call SITREP. It's very important that you have to make sure that when you are sharing any information that are health related, you have to use caution. And many times that you have found that some organizations, even countries, they create what we call mass hysteria, where people become so hysterical and they become so concerned unnecessary, and it can actually create into a mass riot, and where community members can take things into their own hands. So it's not just health-related information, you also have then health facilities. And this is where you have to, in health education, you are a patient, you are sick. You go to a nurse, or you go to a doctor, or a medical practitioner. Now the place where you go is called a facility. It's called a health facility. And health facilities can be clinics, it can be a hospital, it can be a surgery, it can be anything that is health related. As long as you know there's other places that are personally or that are designated only for health related aspects or health related issues. So in your paper, define what is a health facility. Give examples of different health facilities. Also discuss what challenges are faced by health facilities. What are the successes that are faced by health facilities? For example, let's take a hospital. Now, hospital is housing so many patients. Now, the challenges that most hospitals as a health facility are facing is the issue of cleanliness, for example, issue of hygiene, issues of sanitation, water. So discuss those aspects. How are you going to make sure, how is water sanitation, poor water sanitation, hygiene linked to health facilities? What do health facilities do to make sure that they have very or effective water and sanitation hygiene provision? So these are some of the things that you can bring out. What are the factors that makes health facilities more effective? What impact does health facilities have in a given community? You can also talk about the accessibility of health facilities. You can also discuss about the availability of health facilities. So you have health facilities that are available, but the question is, do community members have access to these health facilities? Because you might find, especially in the rural area, where health facilities are available but they are not accessible. And when I mean accessible, I mean about the distance, where the community members are and where your health facilities are. So some communities have to travel for long distance before they can actually reach those health facilities. And then also, when you have the health facilities, how does the infrastructures look like of those health facilities? It's very important that you not just look at the facility, but also at the infrastructure. And within the health facilities, you also have services. Are these services comprehensive? Are they effective enough? Are these services affordable? So these are some of the dynamics that you have to discuss, and some of the factors in your paper which are very much more needed in your paper, in your exam paper. Then we go, as I said before, that health education is quite a broad subject. Then you have to look at the issues of urinary problems, and this is mostly where you can also discuss the issues about prostate cancer in men. You can also look at different challenges, and this is all part of the anatomy of a human being, whether it's male or female. So this is also where we can look at. Now currently in Namibia, we have so many people that are not going for checkups, especially when they reach the menopause or they reach certain age, especially after the age of 40 and beyond. They don't go for checkups where they can look at prostate cancer, and many people, they are only diagnosed very late after it was found that they've got prostate cancer. And this is one of the things that you have to look at, which is very important, that how do you deal with prostate cancer, or how do a human person deal with urinary problems. So as you're going to look through this, you will find out that there are different medication people can use. There are also different intervention that can be used. So in your discussion, discuss this different intervention that can be taken as part of addressing this problem, which can produce prostate cancer and other health-related diseases in male and in female. So I have come to the end of my presentation. I hope that this presentation has helped you, and I will encourage you to read through the whole study guide and just to have a comprehensive understanding. And I wish you all the best for your exam. Thank you for listening and watching the video. Bye.